answer the question.
I know that Representative Mike Villarreal made several attempts to bring
Sales disclosure.
some change to that system. Do you know if either Menendez or Bernal are working on anything? Have you had any contact or, okay.
So I think that this is kind of the very thing that we want to, not only do we want to talk a little bit about this process, but we want to take some inputs, certainly as your elected official, representative on District 1, and representative on the Bexar Appraisal Board of Directors. I want to be able to also communicate. So this is very important to, the hope is that we can get the information out to you and then get some feedback as well. I'll go ahead and stand up here and we'll just kind of, I guess, go ahead and take some questions regarding the process and any other issues you might have. We'll start over here.
With regard to the evidence count, you said that you use properties in the neighborhood. So there is a name to each neighborhood. Okay, and so when I went for the informal hearing last year, what the map they showed me homes that were in the evidence pack that were outside of the named, my named neighborhood. So
sure. When
you say neighborhood, you mean neighboring neighborhoods?
Generally, because we're doing a mass appraisal, that's a very good question. Just because there may not be sales in your immediate neighborhood, as I say, some neighborhoods change street by street. There may not be sales on your street or specifically in your named neighborhood. We may have a cluster of neighborhoods that represent an area that we call a neighborhood. Or we may have to go to a competing market in near proximity to your neighborhood if there's not enough sales in your own neighborhood.
So there's no radius?
Pardon me?
There's no radius from that
There's
point?
no radius in mass appraisal, and there's no radius in fee appraisal. If someone needs to look to find a comparable for your home, they're going to go to the best competing market to find the best comparable for your property. That's just the way it's done.
Who determines the neighborhood?
I'm sorry?
Who determines the neighborhood?
Most of them were done years ago. People, I mean, we have probably 6 or 8 people that are retiring with 35 years experience.
In his city council district, I live in this school district, I live in this, post office district, so.
You know that Tobin Hill is considered a neighborhood, and not far from
Yeah,
it.
who calls it a neighborhood?
The appraisers do. The residential appraisers.
So you get to choose the neighborhood?
Yes, well, the residential appraisers will make a determination about neighborhoods that have like characteristics when possible.
So let me I just see if I can't maybe translate some of that. I think to your point, you're simply saying what's part of the evidence packet is some of these choices that were made. I've actually gone through an appeals process myself, and can tell you that's also your opportunity to question some of the choices that are made and to say, this is how yours is different. So I would say just from my side, because this is not on the Bexar Appraisal Board of Directors, my role is not to interfere with the operations. We oversee the chief appraiser, and we have a mandate to oversee the appraiser himself, but not in the operations process. But I can tell you, having gone through that process, as you look at some of these choices that are made, you have an opportunity, correct me if I'm wrong, to talk about some of these choices that are made. Is that correct?
And who verifies the accuracy? I've already gotten a packet, so I've looked at it. Who verifies the accuracy of the information? Because in my street, and what is showing up on mine, is a multitude of houses that are listed as single family that are multiple. A multitude. I would say easily 3 or 4.
In that there is like a garage apartment or something?
Like there's 2 apartments in the back, like there's 2 apartments in the back, like there is a second floor. A second floor.
Yeah, but we may have called them something other than residential. We may have called them.
You call them single family. I have the evidence.
We're very interested in seeing it.
Yeah, I mean, we're both on the same street. We both have the same
I think several years ago, I went in to make an appeal, and I brought that to the appraisal district's attention, at which point I was clearly told that I should mind my own business and not be concerned about how anyone else's
One of my
property.
staff members said that too.
Yes.
Do you remember that person's
I
name?
have-
Uh-oh.
I fire people
No
for this.
names. That was several years ago.
So I'm here to tell you, that's one of the things that we do oversee, and I can say that the chief appraiser does have that policy. In fact, I remember what you have said, that everybody in there should be treated as if it was the chief appraiser's mother going in there. And I can tell you that the process that I've gone through myself, without anybody knowing who I was, it was a fair one. Of course, it's not a comfortable one because you're dealing with taxes, but it was a very fair process.
But I mean,
So-
I know that on my packet, that I live next to a multiple that has 3 rented apartments in the back. And the house next to that has 2, and it's an enormous building, it's double the size of the house. And how you could not know that is beyond me. When I have my new house, and I have somebody sit in front of it in my house for a half an hour looking at my house like they're gonna glean what's going on in my foundation from that. I mean, it's
We
like, I don't know how you don't know.
Oftentimes when properties are converted from single family to multifamily, along St. Mary's Street, there's a number of mansions that are actually half are residential, half are offices, half swing back and forth depending on whatever the owner, however he wants to appeal his property that year. And so there's a lot of things that come into play there. Also, if we don't have a building permit on the adjoining property, we don't allow our staff just to go and walk on people's property. So
They don't have to walk, because I mean, I got a building permit, so they came in and sat out in front of my house. I got a building permit for a foundation repair. So if they can sit on my driveway and glean whatever they glean to double my property value, why can't they sit next door and look at the 2 shanties? And the house next to that has a building, it is double the size of the house.
It's a cinder block building.
It's a giant cinder block building that has 2 apartments in it. I don't understand
I don't
that.
have a good answer for you, but I'm happy to look into it if you want to give me the addresses.
I mean, I've called 311.
So, I mean, I think this is also another good example of where the city, because as you're talking about, these are also, we have a process to deal with zoning, and this is a good example of where the city and the Bexar Appraisal District can share information so that we can better address these kind of concerns. So, okay, let's take another question. Back there. Yep.
I had a question about historic districts. What is the appraisal process if you live in a historic district? Is it any different than a non-historic
It's
district?
historic. No, it's identical.
It's identical, so you use like the mass market around to determine what the sales are?
Generally, the historical districts have their own areas, and there's an exemption based on the fact that you're in the historic area. We try to look at other historic homes when we are valuing them, and if we have sales of historic homes, we use them to compare to the subject property.
I was just curious about that, because some historic districts are, like King William, for example, obviously the value of the house that sells down there is a lot higher than my historic district.
Right.
So is that something that you keep in mind when you're looking at the property values?
If you live in an area that's not high-end, we don't look to a high-end area just because you are both historic. They have nothing to do with each other.
Okay. So you're looking for like a similar housing stock?
Right. That's the way appraisal works. You find a property, then you try to find properties that are similar to it that have sold. Our task is to value property at what it would sell for. So if we have sales of similarly situated properties, we look to them to determine the value of the subject property.
Okay, thank you. Great question. In the back over there.
Speaking of the multifamilies, if we have a property that was a multifamily at one time, has multiple meters, was rentals, but it is a single now, it's only us there, the back is just, guests and whatever, is there a process to easily convert it to single family? Or, I assume our taxes are higher because it's deemed.
Well, so I think that there's a process with the city, obviously through zoning, but I think what your question is your valuation different?
Right.
Because you're living in a
depending on what part of town you're in, it could be very different because some parts of town have seen even higher increases in rents. So if we're valuing that thing based on income, it very well could be higher than what a residential property would be appraised at.
So we're not getting extra income because we're not renting it, it's
Just let us know. And, you know, also, if we have it categorized as something other than residential, if it's a duplex or a triplex or a quadruplex or an eightplex, we're only going to give you a homestead exemption on the portion of it that you can homestead. And you won't be given a homestead exemption on the entire property. So that's another.
and that's only if it's deemed multi-flood, but if it's like I have a guest house or a carriage house or whatever.
A carriage house is different. If it's part of the residential property, it still allows for that. It's still allowed for everything under that same fence, if you will, or the property line.
So this is probably something I need to do when I come to talk
Yes.
about the.
Definitely point that out to them.
You know, that brings to mind, I want to talk a little bit about this. You were talking about exemptions, homestead exemptions and others. Can you explain how those also kind of have a lifespan and notices get out? So people need to know this portion.
This is really important. Not that anybody in here is over 65, I can tell. But your homestead exemption is so important to you, not just from the standpoint of recently, they just increased the mandatory homestead exemption to $25,000 for school tax purposes, was $15,000. So that's another $300 a year in savings right off the bat. Most importantly is it kicks in that cap. It limits your value increases irrespective of what the market is doing to no more than 10% annually. So it kind of eases into things. Not that 10% isn't a big hit, but it's not 100%. It's not 50%. So it's very important. If you're over 65, in San Antonio is the only major metropolitan city in the state of Texas. Somebody said Corpus Christi. Corpus Christi couldn't beat up Stone Oak. It's night and day. So the truth of the matter is, San Antonio is the only major metropolitan city that has a freeze, just like you had on your school if you're over 65, for the school, the county, the city, and the Alamo Community College. For the most of us, that's the bulk of our tax. Sarah and the hospital district don't freeze, but they're a very minute portion of your tax. Let me finish. The most important thing about that over 65, in addition to the freeze protection, is if you move. If you move from one property to another within the state of Texas, you can port the value of that freeze. In other words, let's say you should be paying $1,000 in taxes, and you're paying $500 in taxes because you're more than a century old, and your taxes were frozen a long time ago. That relationship is roughly 50%. So whenever you apply to your new home, irrespective of its value, if the taxes on your new home should be $3,000 according to what you paid for it, the market value and the combined tax rate, you only pay taxes on $1,500 because that was the value or the relationship, the ratio of your former exemption. And it's portable no matter where you go in the state of Texas. But I misspeak.
No, that's correct.
I have to ask her.
But do remember, it's not the appraised value. The appraised value can continue to climb even if you are 65. Your taxes, however, are frozen. If you paid $1,000 in taxes the year you turn 65, except for the two small districts, your taxes will remain frozen at the 65, even if we thought your home was worth $100,000 last year and $200,000 this year, your taxes are still the same amount they were the prior year. Then I have a second issue. The legislature also changed something that's silly. So if you look on our website and you're looking for your over 65 exemption, it now says other. They won't allow us to put anything related to a person's age on our website, so we had to change our over 65 exemption to an other exemption. Just know that's out there.
You had a question?
Well, but before we get to, I just, because I wanted you to cover the fact that, too, though, is that those exemptions need to be reapplied for. I wanted you to mention.
Occasionally. As I said earlier, we get a lot of our information, we got our historical information from multitudes of agencies. School districts used to do their own assessments, the county used to do their own assessment, the city used to do their own assessment. So a lot of the historical data in our office is not as reliable as I would like. So we have to, as a matter of law, ask folks to reapply if we're missing. If we can't check all the boxes. Yes, we have a homestead exemption. Yes, we have their driver's license. Yes, we have some form of identification. yes, the actual owner signed the document. If we can't check yes to all those boxes, I have to ask you to reapply. As a matter of law, I can ask you to reapply every year if I want to. Never one would I ever do that. But when there's something suspect in the file, we can ask you to reapply. Otherwise, generally, your homestead exemption will follow you. I actually have to track your age so that I automatically send you an over 65 exemption application in the mail. That's law. I don't even know how to do that, but I know we do. Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, now I'm still confused. I'm just determined to be confused. I'm going to be 65 this month. So if I paid $700 last year to the school district, is it going to stay $700?
No.
Or if I paid 3% to the school district, is it going to stay 3%?
You're turning 65 this year.
Yeah.
You're going to be frozen this year.
What's going to be frozen?
Your taxes will be frozen
Okay,
based
the tax rate. If I'm taxed at 6%,
the
The amount
tax.
you write a check.
the tax dollars. So if I paid $700, it's going to stay $700.
No.
That's
It's
a percentage
a He's turning 65 this year.
Right.
It will freeze at this year's tax.
Whatever it
amount.
is.
Okay, but what is it? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Is it a percentage? Is it a dollar amount?
It's the dollar amount that you pay to the city, the county, the school district, and the Alamo.
So if I paid $700 last year, it's going to stay $700.
It's not based on last year, it's based on the year that you turned 65.
Okay, so if I paid $700 this year, it's going to be $700 next year.
If that's what you pay this year, that's what
Okay,
we're
all
doing
right.
next
It's
year.
a dollar amount.
It is.
Okay.
If you
Yes.
make improvements, will that affect it?
Improvements, if you do something major, you add a major addition to your home, you add a pool to your home, then indeed we do change the cap by the value of the new construction. However, normal maintenance, fixing the roof, painting your house, those kinds of things, even remodeling your kitchen does not do anything to your freeze.
Well, I had to rebuild a garage that was destroyed by a tree falling on it. And when I rebuilt the
replacing the existing
garage,
structure.
my base went up.
Question?
I have a question regarding the homestead exemption. I work in the office of Tom Yatkus, and he sends his regards, and thank you, by the way, for putting this on. We do a lot of real estate and probate law and a lot of work with elderly residents in the neighborhood. And very often people come in and they've lost their homestead exemption because in the disposition of an estate, the property's either been transferred to a surviving spouse or to an heir. And if that person is 65 or over, is there anything that we can do on our end during the conveyance of the property that ensures that that person doesn't have to manually reapply?
So the person who was 65 has died?
Correct. And then the person that's acquiring the property is also 65.
Yes, and they are married to the person?
Correct.
And
or
we're
their surviving child.
surviving child?
Correct.
And are they on a deed?
Oh, it's being transferred from the deceased over 65 to a family member also over 65.
They will requalify on their own if they're over 65.
Right. So we're wondering, because a lot of people think that the homestead exemption carries over, is there anything that we can do to prepare our clients so they don't?
It won't carry over to a child. It will.
So they need to manually reapply.
It will to a surviving spouse if they're over 55 and they don't remarry and they continue to live in residence.
Right. So, and also because the deadline's coming up, we've had a number of people that aren't our clients coming in to ask, is there anything, if they're not able to have the homestead exemption applied before the 31st deadline, will it, like if they're in the process of applying, will it apply
yes.
to next year?
We can even go back
Yes,
a year.
okay.
We have people that forget. And some, when we take an exemption off an over 65 person, we send them 3 notifications, and the last one is by certified mail. So the notion that they're not being notified isn't really the problem. A lot of people just don't deal with it. And we deal with that. I mean, we had, 40-some thousand people in and out of the doors for the last several weeks when we had a homestead deadline. But again, even homestead, we'll go back a year and add it if we can.
Okay, so it does retroactively apply if they
1 year.
apply for it. Okay.
So I want to take this time to recognize that we have former council member Mariela Cisneros, former council member District 1.
I just want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to ask the questions that we do have. I brother's here and he's got a question, so I want to pass the floor to him. Robert.
The average residential increase was 7.6%. What is the average for rental properties?
Large multifamily,
No,
apartments?
One or two.
I don't know that number offhand. I do know that apartment complexes went up 19%.
Yeah, we have some single units that went up 40%.
In certain areas, frankly, we were pretty far behind on duplexes, and part of that has to do with if they are infilled, if the duplexes are not in a specific duplex neighborhood, for example, where a developer puts a whole bunch of duplexes, in a row. If they are simply infill in older areas, a lot of times those duplex properties did not get updated over time, and so we have some catch up to do, and indeed some of those did go up pretty substantially.
Now, some of these are in zip codes 78207, the poorest zip code in the Bexar County. The minimum wage is below the minimum wage in that area. Do any of these economic factors come into play at all?
It's all based on sales information. So the best thing to do is to gather information on, if you've had the property recently refinanced, if you have an appraisal on it yourself, if you have any sales information specifically to your property type in your neighborhood, that's what we want to look at. And certainly when you do file your appeal on those accounts, you want to make sure and ask for that evidence packet so you get all the sales information that we have. Everything we use to value those properties will be contained therein. Now I'll tell you, we are going to make mistakes. That's the beauty of this appeal process. And that's why 80% of these appeals get handled informally with my staff.
So I want to take this time also to recognize that we got State Representative Brunel's staff here joining us. I want to thank them for being here, Ms. Harvey, Mr. Romero. With that, Charlotte, did you have a question?
Yes, I wanted to clarify something. You said the surviving spouse, and I thought I heard you say is at least 55?
Correct.
Was I mishearing? No?
That's a matter of law.
Okay.
Also, we had veterans exemptions. Now, if you're 100% disabled, you don't pay any taxes. If you're 100% disabled, you have to be service connected.
Yes, I recently moved here to San Antonio, and I wasn't granted the surviving spouse exemption. I was given a $5,000 exemption period.
Did you bring your Veterans Administration letter?
I have brought in all the
And he was 100% disabled?
No, he wasn't disabled. He died on active duty.
But was it service connected?
Yes, ma'am. He died while on active duty.
This is going to cost.
Yeah.
I'll give you my card. Just give me a shout in the morning,
Okay.
and we'll look into it for you.
Okay, thank you.
We have a question over here.
20 years ago, no one wanted to live in Lavaca because of the Victoria courts. We moved to Lavaca.
We got a lot of new neighbors.
All new neighbors, and but not only that, I bought a rental, and it's also in Lavaca, and it's a 1-bedroom, 1 living room, a home, and it's appraised at $98,000. And I'm not sure that, how can you come up to that on a 1-bedroom, 1-room house?
We are as astonished as you are at how much properties are now selling for in the older neighborhoods. It seems that across the country, people, I live in Austin. I rent here, and what we found there, the values have gone crazy. But people were tired of trying to drive in from Hutto and Buda and wherever else and are moving back into town. And so those areas are getting to be very valuable because people don't want to do the kind of commuting that they were doing for a long time, and people have decided that they like city living again. For a long time, people couldn't move to the suburbs fast enough, and over time now what we're seeing finally here in San Antonio is that people want to move back into town, and they are driving up prices. And I share your pain, but we react to what properties sell for.
It almost seems like we're being penalized for moving into
No, you're actually lucky that your house is more valuable is another way to look at it.
And the truth of the matter is, you know, the best evidence you can have, besides finding sales information in your own area, is list your property. If it's a rent house, list it for $150,000. See what happens.
Okay.
I'm looking at my taxpayer evidence packet, and I'm looking at categories. There's a class and a condition. Under class, my house is very good. Under condition, it's average. What's the difference?
The very good is a classification that we use in the Marshall and Swift Cost Guide. It's a national costing publication that is trended for San Antonio's market. And that's the very good category that your home is in. The average is average condition for the neighborhood. It's not the best one in the neighborhood. It's not the worst one in the neighborhood. It's about average for your neighborhood. That's all.
And for that type of property.
Correct.
And the first category, what would?
The classification, the quality of the construction of that particular property.
Okay. And where does that come
from the Marshall and Swift Cost Guide, that's what we subscribe to.
And where do they get the information?
From builders and developers across the country. They're a recognized national publication.
Okay, so how do they value something like that in a very old neighborhood?
They value those just like they do everywhere. There are age factors, and the condition factor is what primarily drives those older neighborhoods. Whether or not the property has been renovated, whether or not the property has simply sat there with the same coat of paint for the last 50 years. That's kind of how we adjust these.
And how do they adjust that to, like?
They don't. They do a basic cost number on the basic bone structure and finish out of various categories of residential, commercial, multifamily property. The appraiser has to make a judgment call as to the condition of that property. Has the class changed? We see renovations that completely change, not necessarily the characteristics of the property, but they certainly is not the same old house that was built in 1920.
So like if it's if they're evaluating this structure essentially, or how it was built, are there any adjustments made for conditions that affect that structure within a neighborhood, like drainage or land settlement and that kind of thing, soil settlement, stuff like
those things that are specific to your property may be next to a drainage culvert. I don't know. But there's a lot of things that can adversely affect your property, just like there's a lot of things that can positively affect your property. We have neighborhoods that have golf courses in them. If you back up to the golf course, that's worth a value. If you're across the street from the golf course, that's not as valuable. Those kinds of things.
Do you want to go next?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask.
Yes,
so
sir.
then the solution is to list the house and sell it? Is that what you're?
No, sir. It's not the solution at all. I was simply saying, for your own comfort level, you know, if we think it's worth $98,000 or whatever the number you said it was, that seems like a lot of money for a one-bedroom, one-bath home to me too. But I also know you can't rent a one-bedroom, one-bath in most parts of downtown for $1,000, and that's basically what that would equate to.
there.
You have any questions? Any other questions?
Yeah, I got actually two questions.
Okay.
You said something about school tax deduction now being more than 25,000 or something.
The homestead exemption was increased from 15,000 to 25,000.
The homestead exemption. You did the same thing about school taxes.
The homestead does affect your school taxes specifically.
The homestead exemption on your school tax.
Okay. Do we go back if it's already frozen? Do we go back
Yes.
now?
We already readjusted all those. We readjusted all those already.
You adjusted already?
Back down.
I
Because
see it on mine.
Yeah, we did.
I'm paying the same amount. The other question has to do with hospital taxes. Now that we have a different kind of health care system, with Obamacare saying that everyone has insurance, why are we paying hospital taxes? Because used to we provided the hospital for people that didn't have care, so why should we pay hospital taxes anymore? And and the second part of that is, why are the hospitals not paying taxes?
Many of the hospitals do pay taxes.
Well, like Baptist,
Baptist
Santa Rosa,
Santa Rosa is exempt.
Pardon?
Santa Rosa is exempt. Baptist is not exempt.
Well, that's what I wonder why they don't all, since we have them in healthcare, why they don't pay taxes and we quit paying hospital taxes. Because that's one of the higher things, and each year that goes up.
We don't.
The hospital taxes go up.
We don't have any control over the creation of taxing jurisdictions. That's a state-created tax. When the state decides to allow Bexar County or Harris County or Dallas County or Travis County to have a hospital district, that tax is imposed on everybody who lives within that district.
And
I don't
also,
know what the
do the other counties also pay taxes into the hospital taxes here in Bexar County?
I'm sorry?
Or just Bexar County pay the taxes for the county
No one
hospital?
pays taxes. It's exempt.
Pardon?
It's exempt.
No. Are we the only county that pays into university hospital the taxes? All these other counties use this hospital. So.
My understanding is I think we only tax within the jurisdiction which the.
So only Bexar County pays.
Right. No, people
taxes.
come here and use our hospitals all the time from Medina County and outlying counties.
Oh, I know. It's open to about 12 different counties.
It absolutely is. And no, they wouldn't be paying taxes on it.
So we pay the taxes for people.
Yes,
and
we
going
do.
back to that school thing, so you're saying that it's supposed to be adjusted. If I look at my tax, in other words, and I was frozen, about 15 years ago, then now with this new exemption, I will be paying less and it will be frozen at that amount, or how does that work?
Yes, for the school tax. Your school tax was readjusted from the $15,000 homestead exemption that you had before to the $25,000 homestead exemption. So your ceiling on your school tax should go down.
Okay, even though it was frozen at a certain
Even
amount.
though it was frozen
Okay, I'll look
earlier.
and see. I'll check that.
When did the exemption change? What year?
Please, to be fair, I need to get to some other members of the group, so let's be mindful that we have some other questions. Let's go.
Yes, I'm kind of with you gentlemen over there in the Rockland neighborhood, except I'm on the north side of downtown. Don't necessarily feel that it's right that the market drive up the prices and force them out of the neighborhood. In the span of 2 years, mine has gone up 220%. Last year, 100%. My neighborhood is littered with for sale zones. I mean, they're currently paying in my house more in taxes than I do in principal and interest. Just 8 months ago, I sat down with a formal appraisal process to meet a number. Now, I'm seeing 100% increase in the span of 8 months. Why is that so?
Every year stands entirely on its own. Based on the sales that we are seeing in the marketplace right now, we reappraise every property every year.
I get that, and they build 500,000 townhomes next to you. It's going to drive us guys out.
Not if it's not.
That's what would be compared to your property. They're going to look at properties that are similar to yours that are sold in your neighborhood. And, you know, the truth of the matter is, it's a matter of state law. We can choose not to reappraise and simply look at property once every 3 years. The state comes in here and tests our level of value on all these different categories, especially category A1, which is residential, to make sure that we're within plus or minus 5% of 100. That's why we look at property every year. We can't afford to fail the study, which we did in San Antonio ISD in 2014. But the truth of the matter is we appealed it. We managed to get our values certified, but it also sent up a red flag. It wasn't just SAISD. We were low in a lot of areas.
But we were far and away the lowest in San Antonio Independent School District, and having done that appeal myself, let me assure you, we had to raise the values in San Antonio ISD because we weren't anywhere near market value in 2014 when we flunked the study, and San Antonio ISD would have lost a great deal of money had we not been able to appeal the test successfully.
I guess the other concern is we feel that there's a human element that's been removed. We talk a lot about appraisal costs and things of that sort. But these older neighborhoods, I mean, we have people there that don't believe. You're culturally displacing these neighborhoods. You know, you're forcing these people out by making such dramatic increases.
I don't believe it's true because there's protections in place for homeowners that are over 65, the older folks that you're talking about. They have the school tax freeze, which also applies to the bulk of the rest of the tax bill. They also have a which I'm not an advocate for them, but they have tax deferrals. So if you're over 65, you don't have to pay taxes if you don't want to.
And everybody under 65 is at the mercy of the market.
I beg your pardon?
Everybody under 65 is at the mercy of the market.
That's right. It's like in Social Security. I mean, that's why the rest of us are still working.
Okay. Any other questions?
Could I comment about the hospital? Why some don't get charged taxes? You know, like Christa Santa Rosa, they're not profits. They're privately funded with donations or whatever. So that I don't think our taxes even really affect or go to them anyway. So that would be why they're not taxed.
I'm sorry. Are you trying to answer Betty's?
Yeah, to answer your question.
Okay.
About the ones that aren't taxed.
Right. Okay. So I don't know if you heard that. You want to repeat that because I don't think I heard you over here. Go ahead. Say that again.
There's a number of hospitals here that are nonprofits that are privately funded that don't get taxed because they're nonprofits. So I don't know that I don't think our taxes even affect them anyway, or go to them anyway. Like Santa Rosa, like you mentioned Santa Rosa, they're nonprofit. They're all private.
Well, I think my question was more, why are we paying hospital taxes and they're not paying? I think the hospitals should pay taxes. If they're nonprofit, of course not, or for whatever exemption they get, fine. But I don't see why we should pay hospital taxes now, because everybody's supposed to be insured. So, got a problem there.
Thank you, Betty. Yes, sir.
Would estimates for repairs be admissible as evidence to contested?
Estimates, written estimates, photographs. I heard someone say something about a foundation. If you have a shifting foundation, you have cracks above your doorways or your windows, sometimes all the way through the exterior of the house. All those things are admissible as evidence. If you have to go to the review board and you're not able to settle with my staff, please remember that you have to bring copies that you have to leave with the review board. Any evidence that's introduced to them by you, they have to be able to keep. That's state law, not our policy.
So it's Xeroxes.
Pardon?
It's Xeroxes, correct?
I'm sorry, dear.
It's Xeroxes.
Yes.
Yes.
No, okay. So the original,
Yes,
the
you
IRS
can just
manually was.
Right.
Okay. Stephen in the back.
So I'm millennial, and I know we have a lot of millennials that are moving here, and a lot of them are moving here because of the low cost of living and being able to start a new life and take advantage of what we have here in San Antonio. I think it's awesome, and I think that some of us that are coming back, I think we call ourselves boomerangs, those of us that have left and are not coming back, you can make a t-shirt, make sure that I get credit for that. But what I was asking is there or are there any plans for any programs? You know, a lot of the things we're talking about are for 65 and over, which is fantastic. You know, the old generation has put in their time. For those of us who are just starting out, are there plans or incentives in place for us that are just starting out that maybe now we want to look at?
That's my question.
Well, I can tell you there's nothing in tax policy that protects anybody that isn't a veteran or isn't over 65.
Except the 10% cap.
Except the 10% cap.
And I will say that to that point, I mean, there are certainly a lot of veterans that are millennials. So there are those things in place. Okay, any other questions? Jack Payne.
In view of the 7% increase in taxes, will you be proposing any tax cuts, Councilman?
Tax cuts at the city level? Yes. So know that the state does require us to not impose anything above an 8% increase from year to year. Now, some of you may have seen this. If you haven't got a copy of this, this is something my office produces, an infographic in both English and in Spanish, and it shows you exactly where your taxes are going. So, for example, as you just brought up, about 21% of the taxes are to the city of San Antonio. So we're not the majority of the taxes that you're paying into, but we certainly are a significant amount, 21%, and of that, we are not allowed to take more than 8%. Now, I know that at the state level, that there's a potential proposition to lower that down to 4%. That could be hard on a municipality because of for obvious reasons. So we're certainly talking about how we handle that, how we can provide some relief for those facing these rising property tax values. So that's about the extent that we're talking about City Council.
Well, Councilman, there's no requirement that you should leave the rate as it is. You are the City Council is allowed to lower the rate if it so desires.
Yes.
And you say it's going to be hard on the city budget. Well, please understand, we're talking about a 7% increase. And if the city budget cannot deal with anything over maybe 2% to account for inflation, I'd say that sounds like incompetence to me there, sir.
I assure you it's not incompetence. I will tell you that this is a conversation that we're just beginning. And so, to your point, we don't even know what that is. We don't have that information provided to us just yet. I will tell you that we are talking about how we can provide relief. Last year we did the 8% limit, and so this year, as we're moving forward, if there's room for us to make it less, then I think that's a discussion worth having. But we don't even know what those numbers are, so it's kind of hard for me to say we're going to do this when we don't know X, Y, and Z. So
when will the council know that?
I'm sorry?
When will the council know that?
Well, we don't get...
Sometime after August 1st.
Yeah, so after August 1st, we actually get the actual amount that the city will be, is supposed to be receiving at that point, knowing also that there's also the potential for the litigation and all this that you saw here. So there's a lot of adjustments, and our city managers having to do a projection based on numbers that may or may not occur. So it's kind of hard for us. It's a moving target. We will be looking at what we can do should that be required. So it's just the beginning of the conversation.
Yes. So if you need to do foundation repair to your house, get your permit and get that done, does that mean that your taxes are going to go up? Because no.
We can't hear what she said.
She said she was talking about foundation repair, and if you had to do that, she thought that the taxes would go up to do foundation repair.
Here's how it works. Let's just say for greens, it costs you $15,000 to fix it. We'll look at that adjustment or some part of that for the year that you get the repair done. Going forward, they'll probably leave a percentage, a lesser percentage adjustment, because you're going to have to divulge to any potential buyer in the future that your home had a foundation issue and that it was repaired, and whether or not that warranty is transferable, yada, 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 yada. Because if you don't, in Texas, you could be sued for triple damages if you don't divulge that. So we're not going to give you the benefit of the full cost of the repair going forward into perpetuity, but they'll work with you and come up with a solution that hopefully everybody can live with.
Now, you know that there's foundation repairs because you send out people based on permitting. So y'all know.
If we get the permits.
Well, you bet you did. So
I
y'all
did in
know.
your case, but we don't get all of them, I promise.
And that speaks to, again, good collaboration between the city and the appraisal district. You have a question over here?
Yeah, everybody's like attacking you because the city here has 21%. San Antonio is the top 10 largest city in the United States. 21% is not gouging. Now, the elephant in the room is this 51% over here that's out of control.
That's because the state doesn't fund education.
And the reason your taxes keep going up is because this school...
State doesn't fund education.
So the city of San Antonio, to run this side of the city, 21%, I think you're doing an excellent job with 21%. I'm just saying, the elephant is the school system.
Yep.
It's broke.
And I want to mention that State Representative Diego Bernal, how many schools has he visited now in his district?
43.
43 out of
56 schools.
Out of 56, and he's really tackling this issue to that point. And the state doesn't fund education, and so
We're
really having to take a close look at it here locally, and we're really glad he's doing that. So would you like to say something about it?
Yeah, as you may know, on Friday, the Texas Supreme Court came out with their decision on the school finance structure, ruled it minimally constitutional, which is frustrating because that might not push the state to change the structure of the school finance system so that the state pays more of the share. So this may continue to be the way that it is for a few more years until we can get some larger reforms going.
But people like me and all these people here in this room, this is what's killing us.
I know.
We cannot afford. I mean,
it's
$7,000 for 1,100 square feet. Really?
Yeah.
Yep. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
The way that schools are funded is based on property taxes right now, which is inherently inequitable for people, and it's a burden on you, and you know.
But you know, even in the city of San Antonio, how many school districts do we have?
13 independent.
How many?
I think it's
13 independent.
13.
I thought it was 14.
Yeah.
Oh, too many.
Absolutely.
Need just
a lot of
one.
money to run these schools.
One school district.
But you have
Divide
to
this money up.
and state taxes.
So,
And that's kind of
But
makes a
at the
difference.
same time, the property owners are getting hit.
And then
They're not able to get the money from their businesses. So you and I and everybody else here that have a little hovel that we like to go home to is killing us. Tax law.
The larger elephant in the room is all the money we spend on litigation. If we nip that in the bud some way, we can probably reduce our.
and no, I want to, mention Cosima's comment earlier about the state representative and our senator is right on point. This is going to take collaboration, and know that I'll work hard to work with State Representative Bernal and Senator Menendez to try to address these very issues. And that's why we want to inform you. We also want to get input. This is very valuable to us. Stephen.
Councilman Treviño, you've been pretty awesome with working with us local startups. It's hard enough doing tech startups in general. It's even harder to do with San Antonio. That's a whole different conversation. But my question revolves around, I see that there's a 7% increase in the residential property tax appraisal, and then there's going to be a 17% on the commercial side. Could you elaborate a little bit on how that works with vacant versus non-vacant properties, and how that might play out a little bit?
Vacant and non-vacant commercial properties?
Right, like how does the 17%, like how does that work? Is it any different? Is there anything
Yes. Once again, everything is based on sales, and the commercial properties actually ended up going up 18% this year. The industrial properties went up a great deal, and the multifamily properties went up a great deal, once again, because of the sales prices that we're seeing on those properties. What also happens is that the $1.5 billion that you see there, the losses, $1.487 losses from 2015 values, that virtually was all lost in litigation after the ARB process was over. And so we have already, just on the few settled lawsuits for 2015, lost another $1.5 billion in the city of San Antonio. We've lost more than that countywide. But when we're looking at commercial properties, we look very specifically at each use type and look at land values differently. We've had to move land a great deal because it's a huge component, particularly in town. If you've got a home that was built in 1920 or that is 1,000 square feet or 500 square feet and it's selling for $100,000, the building itself is probably not worth a great deal. Or say it's a commercial property, it's a small retail property that has 400 square feet and it sells for a couple of $100,000. The value is land. What makes that property valuable is where it exists, location, location, location. And so we have moved, particularly the stuff on the Riverwalk, we've moved a great deal. We've moved a lot of land in the inner part of town just because of, once again, sales prices.
Okay, so it doesn't have anything to do with the revenue they're generating there?
Not on the land, but Well, we will use an income approach to value on the commercial properties when indeed we have enough information to use it.
You know, so, and I want to also mention that, you know, the city has been piloting the vacant building ordinance. And, we just had the report today in our Neighborhoods and Livability Committee that said that a lot of these properties that got onto the vacant building program were sold. So in essence, the program, by getting on the program, it helps get these vacant properties up to par, but it's also helping to encourage the sale of some of these properties so that they're no longer vacant. Well, at least that's our hope.
If only we knew somebody could help them.
Question.
So, you know, a lot of times I cause trouble at these meetings because I can ask unpopular questions, but I do, or make unpopular comments, but I do want to make a comment that's really quite pertinent. I, with my brother and sister-in-law, own a fourplex in Alta Vista, and our property taxes went up from last year at $215 to this year at $241, so a pretty significant amount. We also have decided to put the property on the market. And before we received this, the research that we did with listing brokers and whatnot led us to list the property at $240. And so the appraisal district is actually pretty right on in our case, in that our sense of the market for sale is $240. Now we probably won't get that, but we got a full price offer within a week. So we'll get something pretty close to that. So as much as I didn't like getting this and knowing that our taxes would increase this much, as long as we come in fairly close to, you know, end up selling it for fairly close to what we're getting offered, you know, you guys are pretty right on, at least in our case.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for putting together this infographic. It's very helpful. I'm going to hang it up in our office. But also, we have a number of folks that are elderly and either don't have access to the internet or don't prefer to use it. Is the 224-2432 number the best one to call? Because often people want to, rather than over the phone, they'd like to go in and physically sit down with someone because of either vision or hearing issues, or they just want to physically look at the piece of paper together with someone. Where would we best recommend these people?
The best place to do that, like I said, the next week, the rest of this week, people can walk in and get all kinds of assistance with exemptions.
And what about after this next week?
After this next week, you're out of luck until sometime after August, because we will have about 1,200 people a day scheduled through the front door. And we're going to see those folks that are scheduled first.
So is it best that people call and make an appointment, or that they arrive at the Frio?
The best thing to do is to either come in now or come in after August.
Okay.
Unless it's an exemption issue, you can continue to do that even during the appeals. The appraisers are tied up with the appeal process, but if it's an exemption issue, we have customer service people who can help with that.
Okay. And there are two separate.
Yes, two separate areas.
So my point was we don't have enough parking, and after my first year here, and long before Robert got here, the city was good enough to put up parking meters all around my building where there was free parking before. And when we tried to get those meters removed, nobody listened.
We'll work on that. Let me just say, I want to thank Desiree Leckie from our office who created this infographic, and you know, we did one last year because we thought it was very useful. Know that we'll be printing as much of these as possible. We'll put it in our newsletter. Anybody who wants a digital copy is free to have it. We think the more information you have, the more empowered you are. So we're going to try to get this up everywhere. I believe it'll be up at a lot of our digital screens throughout our city facilities like this library. So thank you for pointing that out. I think this is really important. I also want to mention that Michael Amezquita and Mary Kieke will be joining me on Wednesday for our B session to be presenting a very similar presentation to City Council, an update. So you can stay tuned for that, and encourage you guys to watch on our City channel. So, any other questions?
We did have or at one time we went out into the neighborhoods and helped people. Or do we have any of that going on where we went out and helped the
Don't you
seniors that
remember I
couldn't
was
get
with
to
you 2
the...
weeks ago at Luby's on
Pardon?
Saturday morning? I was with you at Luby's 2 weeks ago on a Saturday morning.
I know, but...
We do it all
We were
the
at a
time.
tax meeting, but I'm talking about out where seniors can't get to you. That's what I'm talking about. We've got areas in San
We'll
Antonio
go
where
anywhere
seniors can't
people-
get to the tax office and don't know anything about any of this.
We'll go
Do we
anywhere
have any
people ask
information
us.
going out to the different senior areas? We have 350,000 seniors in Bexar County, so.
I know most of them come to Peterman.
So,
True.
No,
Well,
we
we-
don't even know about
We
it.
send them a notice every year along with the taxpayer rights
I'll get
remedies and
with Councilman